All right, you guys, welcome to another episode of Behind the Visual, this podcast where I interview those people who are responsible for all those videos and images you see out in the world. And this is the place you get to listen to their stories about how it all came together. So today, my guest is Kim Baskinger. She is a freelance creative director. She has worked for some big agencies. She's worked for BBDO, which is one of the biggest in the world. She's worked for Havas. She's worked for Vayner Media. She's had a great, very interesting life and her path to get to where she is today. We talk about how she went to school at Rhode Island School of Design, and we talk about her internship at Hasbro, where she said was, you'll have to hear what she talks about when she talks about working at Hasbro and what she says about that. We also talk about the first time she saw one of her designs out into the world. And we talk about her job at BBDO and how much she loved it there. We talk about a project she had for one of her favorite projects. So you get to hear about that. I'll give you a hint. It's for Lowe's, but you need to listen to find out Lowe's Home Improvement. So listen to that to find out exactly why she listed as one of her favorites. We talk about how she finds directors and photographers, whether treatments are needed, how in-depth the treatment needs to be. So definitely you should listen to that part if you are a director or a photographer. Talk about what it's like working at Vayner Media and if all the stories you heard about working there is true. And we talk about what is her most fulfilling project she has worked on in her time in advertising, as well as what's her dream job. So this is a very cool one, guys. Lots of cool stories, especially that most fulfilling job. I think you're really going to love that. So check it out, like it, thumbs up it, share it. Everything else you're supposed to do with these podcasts, and let me know what you think. Well, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know it's going to be fun. I can tell already.
Well, thank you for having me. I look
Conversation.
forward to this.
So, let's start with where you grew up. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Fairfield, New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay, so not too far from New York.
No, I think Fairfield is somewhere around 22 miles out from
Okay.
New York City.
Yeah. So where'd you go to school?
Uh, which school? Like grammar
Um,
school?
go college.
I went to college. I went to Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay. Were you creative? Like, so growing up in New Jersey, were you the creative kid in the family? Or is the whole family creative? How does it like?
Well, it's funny. I have a lot of creative people in my family, and I use creative broadly because I think creative thinkers for sure, but
Mhm.
fine artists, my mother's side of the family, her parents both skilled in different crafts. She herself an artist and an art teacher. My brother and I both pretty talented as kids with are a little above average in execution at an early age. So I guess you could say the family was considered, artistic.
So did you take a lot of art classes in college? I mean, high school and all that?
I did. And classes also happened at home. So I
Really?
definitely took art class in school because it was a standard thing in the school system I was in. But my mother being in arts education, my dad being in education, he has a background in science. We did a lot of home projects and a lot of exciting stuff that maybe kids weren't allowed to do at school, like working with certain power tools or certain materials
Oh,
and stuff.
that's
So
cool.
I got a lot of schooling at home in the arts. And then in high school, I wouldn't say I had like the best art education opportunities. They were fairly good, but I supplemented by taking classes at some local community colleges and universities and things like that until I got to college.
So what was your medium? Was it more drawing, painting, photography, filmmaking? Where did you, or is it just kind of a combination of everything?
It's kind of a combination of everything, I would say. I like in hindsight, I think it was very idea driven. like coming up with a solution for something or an idea or a vision to execute something and figuring out what I needed to do to make it. So,
Okay.
if it was, using paper and glue to create something that was like a 3D structure to support, a dollhouse thing that I was making, I think it was more use what I had to create the thing that I needed versus working in any one specific medium. If that makes
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. That's very cool. So when you decided to go to college, what made you choose where you went versus just like some normal
Um,
someplace?
so let's see. My brother was 3 years ahead of me in school. And so I must have been in about the 8th grade when we were going and looking at all different schools for him all over the Northeast, T2 being creative. And we had been to a lot of schools, like all over the Northeast. And when we got to Providence and we got to RISD, there was something just about the beauty of the New England town and the
Mhm.
history of it and the campus overlapping with Brown University. And it had this very like picturesque setting, and it was filled with all these highly creative looking people. And I remember visiting the type shop that they had, and they had all of the letterpress um, set up and drawers filled with type and big guillotines and hand printing presses and things like that. And I was just really blown away by the fact that you could go and use these tools in that environment with those type of people. Like there was something about it that stood out to me as being completely different than anything I had seen anywhere else.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know, it was a gut feeling. I was like, I'm gonna go here. And my parents are like, oh yeah, 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 because in 8th grade. And they're like, oh
Right.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
great to want things. Also, this is a hard school to get into. Um, but I think there was just something about that it felt like the place I wanted to be. And
Okay.
so I went off of that more so than any other place we had visited.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
when to get in there, you have to put together, I'm assuming you have to put together a portfolio and all that kind of stuff and present it on top of your grades and all that other stuff, or how does that work?
Yes. So at the time, this was the 90s. So they have a set list of assignments, right? I think there was, do a pencil drawing of a bicycle of some sort, a self-portrait. You need to have probably a handful of 3D pieces, a handful of 2D pieces, maybe some photography. I forget what the exact assignment was,
Right.
say for the bicycle and the self-portrait, because I think those are pretty classic there. Um, so there was a set sort of number of things that you have to show the range and capability, along with obviously like the grades, the essays, the why, and
Right.
like background. Every school's a little different, but I do remember that bicycle drawing.
So what was your major? What did you concentrate in?
I studied graphic design.
Okay. I had a feeling based on the whole talking about the WordPress, the letterpress thing.
Yeah, well, what was interesting was I didn't know what I wanted to major in, but my brother was, by the time I got into school, my brother was already at Carnegie Mellon majoring in graphic design. And
Oh,
both of
wow.
my parents, they were in education. They didn't really work with anybody that had these sort of professional arts jobs in any sort of corporate setting. So to them, they were like, this is a job that you can get. So like if you're going to go to
Oh,
grad
yeah.
school, this would be it. And of course, we were just starting to have access to computer labs in school for classes that were beyond, computer sciences and stuff. So, just dabbling in Photoshop and Illustrator and playing with typography there and then seeing
Mm.
that, remembering that there and how cool it was. It just felt like a natural progression.
Okay. Yeah, God, I remember when Photoshop first came out. That was amazing. I thought it was so great.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I didn't do anything great with it. I forged parking passes for South Beach, Miami.
That's amazing. I would argue whether I do anything great with it today.
I just got back from Italy and I was looking through some pictures and there were some where there were people in the shot of one of the buildings. And I went into Photoshop, hit a button, it straightened the building up because I'd shot it down here and didn't have the right, all the lenses. And it straightened the building up, but it still had all these little people in there. And I went in and literally just circled them and then hit generate, and the damn thing filled it in almost exactly how it's supposed to be. And I was just like, this is so great because this would have taken me so long 5 years ago to sit there, or even 3 years ago, 2 years ago, to sit there and have to go in there and redo every single one of these little spots to try and make this look legit.
Mhm.
So that part's fun. I enjoy that part as long as it doesn't take over. And
Yeah. Yeah. It is a blessing. It's also kind of scary when you think about all the hours spent retouching, you know,
Mhm.
figuring out the right technique, the right tools,
Oh
as
yeah.
much as there's guidebooks for things, it's the Wild West and figuring that stuff out on your own.
Oh,
There's
absolutely. Yeah.
1,000 ways to do every one thing. So it's amazing, but it's also it's also just really scary.
I do kind of miss the film days though, because you would shoot and what you shot was what you got. I mean, there's obviously there was retouching, but it wasn't to the extent now. Like everybody's like, oh, well, there's a pimple right there. Can we get rid of that? And you just boom, it's gone. Where before you're like, yeah, we can get rid of it, but I have to pay this retoucher to do it, and it's going to be this much money to do it. And then go, it's not that big a deal. We can leave the pimple. But now it's like one click of the button and you're done. So it's a
Yeah.
little, I don't know. Sometimes I miss film for those reasons.
Well, yeah, there's an Instagram that an old classmate of mine at RISD started called 90s Art School. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
all analog, photographs, Polaroids, film, you name it, just tons and tons of photos that seem like outtakes. But if you think about it, when you were at a party and you were taking pictures, everything was an outtake.
Hmm.
And there was sort of the element of surprise and delight in getting a good picture. But even
Oh
when the
yeah.
picture wasn't that good and it still documented the moment, it made the wall.
Yeah.
So the account is purely a history of that type of raw, analog, unedited photography, and it perfectly captures that like perfectly imperfect thing that we were
Yeah.
able to achieve with film before everything became so highly stylized, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The only thing I don't was when we shoot, a lot of times the best shot was on the Polaroid. We took the test shot and you're like, this is great. And you can never, when you got the film back, it's like nothing matched the Polaroid, was as good as the Polaroid.
I know it's amazing.
Yeah. No matter how hard you tried. So what was your first job out of school? So when you graduated, where's the first place you ended up working?
Okay, so when I first graduated, I did a summer internship at Hasbro in Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And I was working in the corporate sector doing graphics and internal presentation design for them. And that was only about a 3-month period. So I stayed the summer after school and I worked there, and it was just really fun. It was a cool place to work. I mean, it was Hasbro, it was world
Yeah.
headquarters. All of my favorite things as a kid were existed within those walls. So that was super cool. And then I moved to New York that September and I landed my first job at a small design shop called Nestor Sturmel, which is no longer in existence.
Hmm. Okay. So what'd you do there?
So I was a junior designer and I assisted in all types of things. So they had a great range of clients. I remember I was doing a lot of illustration work and drawing of maps and blueprints for a high-end luxury hotel brand. They used to shoot and art direct all of the brochures, catalogs, and web stuff for them. So I would assist on that. I was also doing a lot of heavy print design for educational publications, but they were more like magazines. So again, just like a ton of typesetting, lots of like heavy, amounts of pages, heavy information, infographics, things like that. And then on the other end, they had all of these beauty clients. And I worked on a few hair care brands, and I got to design packaging, um, you know, like packaging like the bottles themselves, but then also sometimes they would bundle those and they would have packaging themselves within those. And then also doing beauty campaigns for trade magazines.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was really fun. It was a cool experience because I was, working with an art director and going on set and shooting very, very cool, culturally relevant fashion type stuff for this cutting edge hair care brand, but then also getting to actually design packaging and things like that at the same time. So it was a really cool job in hindsight. I don't think I realized it at the
Yeah.
time, but
Do you remember the first time you saw your work out?
yes. I remember there was a really cool, I think it was like a spaghetti sauce brand, and I think it's still on shelves in certain places. I'm not going to name it, but it had this beautiful craft paper label, and there was a designer that had worked there that had done some great illustration uh with like graphite and ink, and she had beautiful handwriting, and it was, this amazing ink splotched type, and they needed to add new ingredients to the label and also a new flavor. So I was pretty good at recreating that. And I remember, you know, um, just my hands stained completely black, hours and hours of drawing these letters on craft paper and scanning them in and trimming them out and placing them on the label. And it was a lot of effort to get the right thing that looked just messy enough, but just beautiful enough to spend, $20 on a jar of sauce. And I remember going to the supermarket and seeing it on the shelf and grabbing it and turning it around and being like, that's my handwriting. Like, when you
Right.
recognize handwriting. So
Yeah.
in that sense, it was really, really wild to not only see something that I made, but something that I like my own handwriting on a label at
Yeah.
shelf. So I remember that being really cool. And then of course seeing the hair care bottles that I designed out in market was really exciting.
So how long did you stay at this company?
I think I was there for about a year and a half and then I got fired.
What'd you do to get fired?
It's just
Was it,
young and dumb.
yeah,
Like, I think again, I'm somebody that generates a lot of ideas, but unless I'm like super focused on it, at that time and that level of experience probably wasn't self-managing very
oh,
well.
gotcha.
And I think at a certain point, it's also because I found graphic design on its own very unfulfilling. So like I think there was something underlying there that like like I just wasn't giving it my all.
Maybe a
Um,
little ADD-ish.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. I had a job working for a small modeling agency one time, and I hated the name of the agency, and I kept trying to change it. I kept trying to like get her to change the names. Drew out all the new the logos and all this kind of stuff to get her to change it, and she just would not do it. But I was like constantly trying to work on her to do something different. She didn't care. What I found out later was when basically she had a school and then an agency, and she was just making all her money off the school and didn't give a damn about the agency, whether it made any money or not. She was making all her money off the school. So it was a tiny little agency.
I'm in the wrong business. I got to open a school.
Dude, she was making, but she was a scam artist all the way around. I mean, she would have tell everybody who came in, of course, they're beautiful and they're going to be a great model, which 99% of them were not. And then she had, at one point, she had a huge studio. So she had like two chairs in there for these women who were hairdressers. And so she was told them she'd rent them the space and then they would pay half of the utilities. Well, they found out about 6 months, 8 months into it, they were paying all the utilities.
Of course.
Yeah. And then her partner, who was also her best friend, he had quit working with her and moved on and was just doing hair now. And he ended up getting into some financial issues and had to sell a lot of his stuff so he could move out and pay his bills. And she went over and offered him like $300 for everything he had in his whole apartment
Oh man.
because she knew he didn't have any choice, but he needed money. And so she was supposed to be his best friend, and yeah, whatever. Anyway, so where'd you end up going next?
Let's see. I was freelancing and I enjoyed that because, I didn't really have a good understanding of what the agency world looked like, the different types of agencies that were out there and where my skill set could take me. I had like a pretty limited view coming out of school about that. So I was freelancing around, and then I was also working part-time for a costume designer here in Brooklyn. And she had a costume fabrication studio where a bunch of my classmates from RISD worked. And I had a few jobs that I did for her. I would design these pattern books. She was designing theme park costumes for Universal Studios at the time, and to maintain the costumes and do the repair on them because they were pretty intricate. They needed to come with a set of instructions and, pattern books and toolkits and things like that. So I was designing those visually. I was also retracing and making patterns for her, and then also helping create props for Broadway shows.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was really, really fun. So I was doing that part-time and I was freelancing, and I think I did that for about a year and a half.
So what was the first big agency you worked for?
First big agency. How big?
Something that if you said the name, people would go, "Oh, I know that name." People who know advertising. So let's say,
Let's see, the first big name I worked for was BBDO.
okay, how was that?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I never really intended to get into advertising. I did graphic design. I was a little skeptical about it because something was missing. And then through freelancing, and I worked at some smaller agencies in between getting to BBDO, I transferred over from design into art direction and really found the beauty in coming up with ideas and looking at things in a very sideways kind of way, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term. And it really lit me up, and I loved working there because I was actually working for a smaller subsidiary of it on a Visa NFL campaign, and I had taken the job, and I didn't love the agency I was with. Something didn't feel right about it, but I took the job, I was committed to it, and I just put my head down, did the work for a year. And right as I was planning on leaving, some of the executive creative directors that I was working into at BBDO, because they were partnering with us on it, said, we don't want you to quit. We actually want to move you over to our agency. And I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, you'd be so much happier here, just like the way you think, your experience, just like what you have to bring. I think you'll be excited to come here because creatively you'll be a lot happier. And I didn't know what they meant until I got there.
Right.
And I think, I was fortunate enough to work there during a period of time. I'd say it was like 2012 to about 2017. I was there. It was a period of time where the shop was doing some of the best work they had ever done, and it was staffed with some of the best creative talent in the world. And the leadership at the top was just epic and awesome. And it was such a cool place to be amongst people who were so good and so passionate and so driven by the work they were doing. I hadn't seen something like that since I went to RISD. There I was, like, top of the art class in Fairfield, New Jersey, and then you go to RISD and you're like, your mind just gets blown by like the talent that's out there. It was the same thing. All of a sudden you were like, oh, this is what they mean by
Um,
advertising. And it was super, super exciting. And I really loved being there. I loved the leadership. I loved working alongside some of like the greatest minds. I hated the competitiveness and like kind of the bro culture of that, but that's sort of just something that exists everywhere. But the opportunity there was just amazing. Everything, even like a banner ad assignment, was a good assignment there. People understood good ideas. They pushed the boundaries on executions. We had the abilities, the resources and production abilities to create things with such a level of finish and polish compared to where I had even, been working in the past. It was just amazing. I loved it.
So what would be your favorite project you worked on since you got into advertising?
Oh, my favorite project. So I would say one of my favorite projects I've worked on, I don't know if it's the favorite project, but it's one that I loved very much, was for Lowe's Home Improvement. And it was a social media series called Lowe's Hypermade. And at the time, a lot of home improvement how-to stuff was popular on Instagram, Pinterest, things like that. So we were taking these home improvement projects that were trending and pulling them into Instagram, filming them through the Hyperlapse app. Remember when Instagram broke up into like a bunch of little apps, and there was like, you can film something at hyper speed. Then there was like another one that was photo layouts. This was probably in like 2015.
Okay.
Um, so like maybe 3 years into Instagram existence. And we were able to shoot these how-to videos in a single take, right? So they needed to be, roughly 30 seconds to a minute. That was the cap on what people would watch. They were based on trending projects on other channels. And they were A to Z, a complete project shot in a single take on an iPhone.
Oh, wow.
And so there was this amazing amount of choreography and planning that needed to go into pulling these off in a single take, especially
Okay.
because, they didn't want just like one or two. They're like, you're going to film 7 of these in 2 days. So like you had to go in shooting being like, this is definitely what I'm shooting. So just like the sheer amount of planning, the process of taking a project that you thought would look cool and then figuring out the steps and figuring out the choreography and all of the props and things that you would need to make it appear like it was done in that amount of time. It was just like a brain bender. But each one was so different and so fun and so unique, just in the style of the project, right? And then it wasn't just even like the style of the project. It's like, what type of people would do that in their home? What type of home do they live in that they would be doing that? Like they were these sort of, little windows into people's DIY worlds. And I loved making them. We probably made about 20 or 30 of them
Oh,
over a
wow.
couple year period.
Damn. That's very cool.
Yeah, that was super fun. And they were cheap. They were really scrappy. Until, they got really popular. So I think we started out, each one was maybe $1,000 to $3,000. And then I
Okay.
remember we had about, I think 100 grand per video by the end of it, because we were shooting a lot of them stacked up
Right.
together, but it's just the popularity of them and the complexity grew. And then of course, like the level of finish needed to get a little fancier as we went on.
Well,
I
damn, I
love
shot
that.
some for Lowe's back then, but obviously we did not work together on anything. But yeah, I was shooting for them up until about a year ago when they moved everything from, they had a big production company here that they were using, and then they split it off into one in Chicago and one down into South Carolina. So that's when, like everything, whenever I'm working with somebody a lot and then they go, hey, I'm leaving, going somewhere. I'm like, all right, well, this client's gone. So was that one of your most challenging projects you've had, or was there other things that were more challenging than that?
I mean, challenging and just like figuring it out,
Yeah.
sure. But we worked with amazing directors and production partners that really did all the really hard stuff. No, I mean, gosh, I feel like every project's super hard in some regard. No, I don't think it was the hardest
Okay.
or the
Yeah.
most challenging.
Because I can see like some projects are pretty straightforward and pretty easy, and then other projects have there's a lot of moving parts to them, and you got to make sure everything's right in line. So you're always prepared though for something. Not, I just assume at least on every shoot something's going to go wrong at some point,
Uh-huh.
and you just got to be prepared for whatever that is.
Yes.
So Have you had anything like that where you've been on set and something just went, like, oh hell,
I mean, nothing catastrophic, thank God.
that's good.
I've definitely, been on set where, there's prop problems or, talent problems, but in that case, you're usually so far in that's nothing that like throwing some money at can't fix. So I've been lucky enough that nothing's been completely shot to hell in that
Have you
sense.
had any talent issues that were like just people difficult to work with?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of times when you're casting, there's the people that you want to cast or the director wants to cast because you understand their coachability and the range that they can provide.
Right.
But then when you're taking those selects to the client and they're like, well, that person's not really our brand. And I'm like, well, you're not looking at them through the lens of the camera with all the styling and the makeup and the setting and all that. And they tend to make choices about who they believe their brand to be. Like they're projecting onto these people and you get on set and some people can't act.
Hmm.
And you got less and less time now to shoot things. So it's not like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
just have as many takes as it's gonna take to get this done. It's like we have 4 takes for this one line and this person can't enunciate this word.
Oh,
What do we do? So I think that's a pretty common problem, particularly in like working in CPG world where, you have brands with like 11 clients on it, right? So like casting just becomes like, designed by committee in that sense. And so you're usually winding up with talent that may look a certain way in a photo, but then you get them on set and you can't really get anything usable. And then you get to the edit and the client's like, what? Like, we don't have any better takes. I'm like, you were there, you know?
yeah, I've had those before. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
don't hire your mom to star in a commercial.
yes, that's probably a good advice. Yeah, I had one client was on set, approved every single thing we shot, and then they got the images, and then the boss of the person who was on set calls me and says, "None of these are going to work." And I'm like, "Why? They were all approved. I thought they looked good." And I'd found out before that this client constantly asked for reshoots, no matter what. So from a friend of mine who had shot for him the year before, they said, because we were shooting dresses inside a home and there was a window where you could see outside, but it was a cloudy day. They said, well, we can't see any definition in the sky outside. So we need to reshoot all of it. I'm like, nah. I said, we can, but you're gonna have to pay for it.
Right.
And I never heard from him again. But he had told me, it's like, when you get your check, go cash it, because he shot him on a sweep, and I don't remember if it was white or gray. But when they got the pictures, like, no, this needed to be shot on whatever the other color was, and you need to reshoot it all again. And they were just trying to get more images, I think. It's also the company who was like, this was like when I first started shooting like any kind of commercial stuff, and they were like, we need somebody to steam the dresses. I was like, okay, we can do that. It's going to cost you this much. Oh, never mind. We'll take care of it ourselves. Well, they show up and they go, oh, the dresses must have gotten wrinkled in the car on the way over here.
Yeah, I think it's that type of you see it all the time. I think there's always people cutting corners or they make an assumption about, what a job must be, and they don't really think about all the stuff we have to think of, like
Mhm.
all the details and the experiences that we have from doing these things like 100 times now. You don't need to do that. We'll take care of it. Oh, shoot, look, it's messed up.
Yeah.
And I think that there's always in the hierarchy on the client side a lack of accountability, and it could be for a million reasons. It could be inexperience. It could be people are just scared of who they work for and, don't want to speak up. I think there's also just people being like, who cares? Just reshoot it, and they don't really think about the implication of time and money. So sure, I'd like to think that people aren't just trying to get more images, um, flat out, but ultimately that's what they're asking for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I've had them go, well, wait, can we throw a hat on this? It's not an extra shot. We're just putting a hat on it. I'm like, yeah, it kind of turns into an extra shot. But
right.
so how often are you on set now these days?
Not very often.
Yeah.
I think after like a certain level, you've got teams of people that are going and executing and touching the work and, you know, doing the day to day.
Yeah.
But every once in a while I'll get
You
to go.
miss that?
Well, sure, because it's fun. You get to work with all these cool people who know how to use all these cool things you don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with a camera.
Right.
I just point and be like, make it nice.
Right. So when you were going on set, did you go anywhere cool, like any cool locations?
Yeah, I mean, cool varies,
Yeah.
like I've definitely been a lot of interesting places. I remember going to Sofia, Bulgaria,
Oh, wow.
shoot a bunch of spots, and I think that was in 2018, maybe fall of 2018, and that was just awesome. Like I
Yeah.
never really thought about going there on my own, to be there and be there living for a period of time while you're shooting and
How long were you there?
city. I want to say it was like 10 days or
Okay.
something.
Yeah. Nice.
It was awesome. It was really, really cool. And the production value is just absolutely amazing. Like amazing. The craft level of craft and care that they put into stuff is just spectacular.
What's the deal with Lisbon these days? Have you noticed that? I've seen a lot of people going and shooting over there like all of a sudden, where I hadn't seen anybody shooting over there recently
You know,
until like the last year or two.
I've heard a lot about people wanting to shoot in Lisbon. My last job, I was working full time for a Procter and Gamble client because the agency was centered around Procter and Gamble and servicing them. There were efficiencies that they were trying to make by creating hubs for shooting, and I remember Lisbon being one of them.
Okay.
There were a couple places called out that I was like, that's not normally what I would think of, but it seems like either they had production company partners there that they had struck a deal with, or it was, I don't know, maybe central to some of the other brands that were more global. I don't really know much about shooting in Lisbon. I've never shot there, but I did hear that there's been a lot
Yeah.
going on in that
Yeah. I
sense.
don't know, it's like all of a sudden it popped up. It's like Budapest for shooting film.
Mhm.
It's a huge place, I guess, for shooting films now because you can kind of make it look like Paris or you can make it look like,
Yeah,
wherever you want to. And the union, they're not unionized. So you can have a second set or second crew without calling it a second crew.
yeah, you can shoot, all 25 hours in a single day and it
Yeah.
costs, it's crazy.
Yeah. 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 I was over there for a shoot a couple like in 2018, 2019. They were doing that latest Terminator and a friend of mine was working on it. I went over there to shoot some behind the scenes stuff for the catering company that was doing it. And they were having to be on set starting to prep everything at 4 a.m. or something like that every single morning. And I was like, I didn't know I signed up for that till I got over there, and I'm like going to bed at 8, waking up at 3 or 2:30 or something like that. So that was a little
Some
harsh, but
creative director needs their breakfast burrito, I'll tell you that.
yeah, it was cool though. But yeah, so I learned a little bit about Budapest and why they were shooting over there while I was there for that. So do you shoot mostly motion stills? Is it a combo of both? What do you
Um,
concentrate most on
I
now?
would say in recent years, it's been primarily motion. I mean, a lot of the work I've done with traditional agencies has been really TV heavy.
Mhm.
But of course, there's always, style guides, product photography, lots of things like that. So, like, there is a ton of still shooting going on, but nothing that I myself am involved in. I definitely had teams of people working with different product photographers. But a lot of the lifestyle stuff that we were doing was all TV.
Okay. Do you have, how often, if ever, would you have a photographer that was like a photographer director or a director photographer kind of thing? Somebody who did both the photography and the directing. Is that really a thing? Like, because I know a lot of people are saying most photographers need to know motion now. Is that something you find, or is that because of the level of what you're shooting, that's not really a thing?
Um, it's not something that I ever needed, but I understand the need for it, particularly as things have become more content heavy, right? So you
Mhm.
need to be able to pivot between shooting still and, capturing. I think traditionally a lot of the TV stuff that I've shot has been with, dialogue directors. So like we're working with people who are really not just like directing talent to get the shot, but delivering certain emotion and, you know, um just a certain level of performance, if you will. Like I've done a ton of comedy work and that's like super specific. And most of the directors that you get that do that are more writer based. They're not really thinking like visually
Okay.
in that capacity. But as we've been doing more and more social content and there is a need for a blend of capturing both, yes, we do hire photographers that do
So when
both.
you hire a director, like you said, for the comedy thing, and they're more writing, do you lean more on the DP for that, for the visual part of it? Does the director lean more on the DP for the visual part of it, or does he still come up with that, or she?
No, I think yeah, like the DP is definitely like framing and capturing it, but there's usually a large art department behind that. And then working with the agency, I mean, me being of an art director background, you have like a strong point of view and reference for what you want your set to look like, how you want the film to come out,
Yeah,
what you're trying to achieve. So, just because they're more steeped in writing doesn't mean that they're not making those decisions as well. But I think from a brand perspective and understanding where this one piece fits within many,
hmm,
a lot of that direction comes from the agency side and communicating well with that production team and their art department and, bringing that vision to life.
yeah,
So
that makes sense.
but then there's also like, there's killer comedy directors who have like a very, very strong POV, or they have their people that they work with and they have like a very um set look and feel that they work with. And I definitely go after people that, have a good track record and a level of consistency with what they put out.
Yeah. So how do you find these people? I mean, do you ever use source books, or do you know anybody who really uses source books to find directors or photographers? Or is it, because I have found from my experience with the people I know who do it and my own experience doing it, not a lot comes from spending the money to be in a source book. It doesn't seem like, unless they're looking for, maybe they don't know anybody in the area and they go through and they're looking for somebody in that specific area.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use source books. I feel like a lot of directors and photographers that I want to work with come from me coming across things that I'm genuinely interested in, whether it's music or fashion or art, and just building my own references and catalog of people that I think are really amazing. So like, I've got folders and bookmarks in my browser of all different types of people that I want to work with. I have Pinterest boards on Pinterest boards of different styles of photography and ways of shooting things, right? So usually the way I go about it is like I know what I want to create and I know the look and feel that I want. So I might go back and look through my things, or I might think of a certain director that did something once, whether it was in commercial or in film or music video, and reference that, and then partner with my producer to be like, this is the person I would want to go after. And if we can't get that, who do you know that can bring something to life like this, right? So like really leaning heavy on production partners
Okay.
to bring me those sources. But then again, like just Instagram's changed a lot of stuff, like the amount of brand stuff that's on Instagram. I have folders upon folders saved in Instagram of certain like brand photography, and usually, reverse Googling
Yeah.
who did that, finding the portfolio and, sniffing people out that way. Um, I've also definitely worked with production partners, not on the agency side, but on the production company side, that when we do need certain set photographers or people of a certain, capability, they'll usually put together a pool of people and bring them forth to us. So that's often been the way I've discovered some newer talent.
So when you ask your producer to bring you some directors, photographers, do they bring you a bunch and then you narrow it down and then they reach out to those? Like they'll say, like, here's some I found that all have that style that you're looking for. Do you want me to reach out to, say, all 10 of them, or do you want me to reach out to point out to three or four or five that you want me to reach out to?
I mean,
Or they just do it and you go, here you go.
no, 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 no. Like, usually they'll bring us like a bunch. I've had people that have brought me 5 options. I've had people that have brought me like 500.
Yeah.
And between, who's ever in charge, if I'm the ECD, then I'm consulting with my team, or if I'm a creative director working into somebody else, we're all working together to figure out the list of all the people that we're liking, and then where we're overlapping and what we like. And usually you only really want to start out like in groups of threes.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is engage a photographer, or leverage a connect or a relationship that you have to not have a strong possibility of following through. So, we might choose maybe top 5 and approach the first 3. And if a couple aren't available, we usually go for about 3, right? Just to
Yeah.
get a range. I mean, a lot of clients do want you to triple bid. Some will double bid. Some will single bid if you really, really hold their hand to the flame. I think, as budgets have gone down and it's costly to pitch and do treatments, like a lot of clients will single bid. So really you want to be very, very specific about what you're trying to do and produce, and go after those people before going down the path of treating.
Yeah. Yeah. Treatments are fun. We love doing treatments. But I understand the need for them. Although this last shoot I was up for, we did the creative call first, which I thought was great. So it's like the 3 photographers, we did the creative call, and then for the treatment, they just want us to put together images. So you didn't, because they got everything they needed out of the creative call as far as the stuff you would write in the treatment, I guess. And then they just asked for images in a treatment, and we put that together, which
Yeah, I think, it depends. Every job's different. Like some
Mhm.
jobs you can do that and people don't need to treat. I think oftentimes when there's big money on the table, or you're trying to create something that never hasn't ever really been done, that you can't pull reference for, then it's
Yeah.
really important for a director to talk about how all of the different pieces and their vision is going to come together, right? From casting nuances
Mhm.
to set design to, just wardrobe design and overall approach for things. If there's like certain types of special effects or transitions. And then, of course, a lot of these people, when we engage them, are like, I'd love to be able to add a plus up on this and see if, we can stretch the idea out further. So, I think it just really depends on the scale of the project, but
Yeah.
treatments are costly. It's time and money for everybody involved, and no two are, it's not just like you save a template and tweak one to send it out. I
Right.
mean, really, really laborious and expensive, as you know.
Yeah. I would think for directors, it's even more so than photographers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how often do you have stills being shot at the same time? Like I'm doing a job 2 weeks from now, I think, and it's a commercial job, TV commercials, but I'm going to be shooting the stills along. So we're shooting and then we take a break. I'll come in and shoot the stills or whatever. Do you do that a lot, or is that something that's not happening on your end?
Yeah, I mean, we do it a lot. It really depends on how much they're trying to cram into a day with
Mm,
shooting. Because a lot of times when you have your lighting set up for a specific shot, then you want to be able to take a pause and have the photographer come in and shoot with the talent. I think budgets and timing have gotten so tight that it doesn't always allow for that, it's not as simple as it used to be because of the lack of time.
hmm.
So what we find ourselves doing is sometimes having, talent from a different day ready on a side set that will swap in while the main talent from the motion is taking a break,
Right.
and let the photographer run in and use the setup. But it's happening less and less in tandem, if you will. I feel like a lot of the still shoots we're doing now that were product heavy for Procter and Gamble clients, we were booking entire days
Mhm.
to shoot with a photographer, and even that wasn't enough.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
I can see that. Yeah, I guess it just depends. Like the one I did before this was for Zumo, I think is what it's called. It's a new streaming platform um, that they've come out with. I think they just really changed the name of it. And we did the same thing. They would shoot, and then I would come in and shoot. But with them, it wasn't as there wasn't as packed, so we weren't trying to shoot as much in one day. So when video would finish shooting and they're breaking down to move to the next location, that's when I would jump in and shoot. And then it worked out pretty well that way. But if you're cramming in a lot where you're like, literally, we got to get to the next one, we got to get a wardrobe change so we can get to the next one. Yeah, I can see how that would definitely be not good. Because already I feel like stills are the stepchild on motion shoots. So to have it really pushed like that, it's going to be definitely difficult.
Yeah.
So, okay. I want to know what it was like working at Vayner Media.
I wasn't there that long. I was only there about 5 months. It was cool. It was totally different than any other agency
That's what
I've
I've heard. It's like I don't know anybody's worked there. I didn't even find out about it till somehow I came across the Gary V's stuff
Mhm.
that he constantly posts, and then I found out he actually owned an agency. And then I started hearing a little bit about how it seemed a little different from other agencies that I'd heard about.
It's super interesting. I was excited to go there because, it sort of I had gotten to a point in working in traditional agency structures where I just, I was my own worst enemy, just like major imposter syndrome, exhausted by pushing so hard, always trying to achieve more. And I had freelanced into them and had a lot of fun. And, Gary's whole thing is about removing subjectivity from the creative process because he himself, he's a self-made, you know, uh, influencer, internet star, self-help guru, you name it.
Yeah.
Like everything that he's earned is just by being super tenacious and never stopping and, keep trying, keep putting things out there. So, he founded this agency and was like, hey, who am I to tell you what's wrong? The internet is going to tell you when they like your stuff. That's what happened to me. Like it wasn't working until it worked. And like, you can't, there's no exact science to it, So it was really, really refreshing to go into a space where the idea of like just like that internal approving structure is gone before you even get to client, because like most people don't know, like the agency is going to be super, super hard on you. Like your ECDs and your CDs are going to be super hard on you to get a certain type of idea. And then sometimes it goes to your CCO and like the larger team, and it can still get killed before it even gets to the client. All of those layers were removed. Everything was a
Oh,
yes and.
wow.
So in that sense, it was super exciting. It was run completely differently than anywhere I had been, on purpose, like the structures were different. It was fairly flat in regards to like, there's hierarchy for the sake of hierarchy for like moving things along, but it was like pretty flat. Like it was, people even at the most junior level really had a voice in the work there, and were encouraged to be creative and throw down ideas for the Super Bowl spots that all of, the very seasoned ad talent they were bringing in were doing as well. So just a completely different approach to agency structure, which I found really refreshing.
All right. That's cool. Yeah, because I'd heard basically what you just said, about it, but I didn't know if that was actually true or if it was just something that was being put out there just to make you think
That's
that
true.
it's
They do it. They do it. I mean, subjectivity is the enemy of creativity. That's a quote somewhere. I read it again recently. And so like, I think there's a lot of freedom in that type of thinking,
mm,
but that doesn't solve all the problems.
well, yeah, yeah. So what would be your dream job?
Oh, my dream job. Gosh. I think my dream job now would be working direct to a brand, that plays a big role in my life, really being able to, shepherd a brand that maybe is a little bit outdated, something that people use a lot in their day-to-day lives that perhaps they overlook, and being able to reframe it and rebrand it and bring it into, you know, into the current world, you know. I just think there's so many cool brands, small brands starting up and doing amazing things with killer branding and killing marketing initiatives. And, you know, it's like amazing to see that they could do so much with so little. So to get my hands on like a classic all-American everyday brand that maybe has been overlooked and breathe some fresh air into it, I think that would be super exciting for me.
Even if it was like startup type budget.
Everything's a startup budget today.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right about that.
I mean, I like the problem solving, you know. I mean, it'll drive me nuts. It would be great if they had some money to do it,
Right. Yeah.
but I think just being able to reframe how people see a brand that they interact with day to day and maybe overlook could be an incredible opportunity.
I think that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you could bring them back to life. You know, if they're just kind of like teetering on the edge and you came in and like and all of a sudden they're the brand again or for the first time or whatever. That would be very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're running out of time before we hit the hour mark. So I'm going to ask you the last question. What is the strangest or most interesting thing that has happened to you, or the coolest thing that's happened to you since you got into the whole advertising world?
Strangest or the cool? I mean, there's so many strange things. Who listens to this? I don't know if I want to tell you. Gosh, let me think for a second. Well, I'll tell you something that is really, I'm gonna tell you something that was just really satisfying. I think, you know, in advertising, we're not saving lives, you know. Um, I'm gonna twist the answer to this, and I'm gonna tell you about something that was surprisingly fulfilling.
Okay.
So I was working on this NFL sponsorship campaign back in maybe 2013, and we were working with a big brand that was awarding people their like wildest dreams come true with their favorite football teams or football players, right?
Wow.
So it's like, you know, if you have a wild dream or a fantasy about, you know, doing something crazy with your favorite team or your favorite player, you could tweet it, we would fulfill it. And we were going to award these football fantasies to 6 people. And I mean, the floodgates just opened. Like people were writing in all sorts of stuff. And, you know, we wanted to pick the most interesting ones. And there was this one about this woman who really wanted to be the mascot for the 49ers. It was like her life's dream. And she had been writing to Oprah and Ellen DeGeneres and like any talk show host that would even, you know, be able to help her. She had some sort of accident and was semi-retired because of this accident, but it was her life's dream to be the mascot for the 49ers. And we couldn't make her the mascot, but we could make her the mascot sidekick because there was like a fan appreciation day. It was a real game, but it made the most sense to get her on the field with the miner from the 49ers. So we needed a costume made. And, you know, I worked for this costumer
Yeah.
way back when. So it had been about, I don't know, like over a decade since I'd spoken to this woman, really cool costume designer. Called her up. She was still had her shop open. She had like downsized a lot, but she's like, I can make you this costume. And I'm like, awesome. So I get my producers in touch. They're working with her for like a week or two. And I had taken a vacation right before I was supposed to come back, pick up the costume, and head out to San Francisco for this game day. And we were going to award this woman her fantasy and make her this sidekick to the miner. So I get a call from the costume designer about 2 days. Like I get back from my trip and she calls me and she's like, I don't have the costume done. I don't know if I'm gonna have it done in time. And I'm like, what? Like, what is going on? And she was just panicking, freaking out. I think she had like something personal going on. Like something happened where she was behind schedule. She was freaking out.
Wow.
And like when I worked for her, she had like a shop of 20 people. Now it was just her. So I'm thinking like, okay. And I'm like, well, you know what? I can help you.
Oh, wow.
Mind you, I have the flu. I forgot I had the flu at this point. I was like, I'm very sick. I have to get on a plane in 2 days, but I'm going to come to the studio and I'm going to help you. And she's like, oh, that would be awesome because we used to work together. So I became her apprentice. And so for 2 days, we worked tirelessly round the clock, making this costume. We made this wig and this huge hat and these overalls and like these, it was just super, super detailed, like amazing piece of work that she was doing. I mean, she's just absolutely amazing at what she does, but again, she was freaking out. She didn't have any hands, so I was the hands. And I realized like the costume's not done. I got to get on a plane tonight. So I call my producer and I'm like, listen, I have the flu. I can't fly out on Friday for the Sunday game, but I can fly out late Saturday night. I'm going to catch the last flight possible
Ooh.
in before this because I am so sick. And she's like, well, Kim, you have the costume. I was like, I know, but there's nothing I can do to get it to you any faster than that. So we're just going to wing it. Meanwhile, the costume was not done. It was not done. It was far from done. There was so much that needed to be done. I called my now husband, who was my boyfriend back then. I was like, come on down. I've got a job for you. And we were working round the clock and we pull this thing together. We finish it up. We pack it in a suitcase. I'm not showered for 2 days, haven't slept, super sick, like really sick. Get on a plane, get to San Francisco. I'm running on fumes. We get to the stadium, put this woman together, get her out on the field, pull it off. I don't say a word. I'm just like, I'm really sick. I need to go to the hotel and sleep. I'm just like, we pulled it off. It was amazing. It was this woman's dream come true.
Oh, wow.
And I remember I got back to New York and I think it was like a week later, my boss calls me in his office and he's like, do you have something that you want to tell me? And I was like, about what? And he's like, about maybe, the shoot in San Francisco last week. Like, do you have anything that you want to tell me? And I said, no, it went great. Like, what was the problem? He's like, yeah, it seemed great. He's like, the producer called me and told me that she called the woman to set up billing and payment for the costume, and she didn't really want the payment because she said that she totally was not going to, she almost missed the deadline and that you helped build the costume. And you made the wig, you made the hat, you did all these things. And it was detailed. It's not just like a hokey Halloween costume. It's
Right.
like a very like professional grade, like theme park level costume. And I'm like, oh, and he's like, did you lie to your producer and tell them that you were super sick? I'm like, no, I was super sick. And they're like, but did you lie about the costume? And then you made the costume yourself with this woman and then flew it there and pulled it off and didn't say anything to anybody? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, wow, that's just like, I'm so impressed that like, that's dedication. And I'm like, oh, I didn't do it for the job. I'm like, that lady got kicked by a horse and it was her life's dream to be the mascot for the 49ers. There was no way that we were going to get that far and not deliver on it.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
That's
And
an amazing story.
it's kind of funny, right? And he was
Yeah.
like, what? And I was like, no, I'm dead serious. Like, this is just a job. I'm like, but that is that woman's life dream. And she was this close to having it. No way, we were doing it. I mean, if she had to go out in the bag, like in a trash bag on the field, it would have happened, but I'm just not that person. But I remember doing that and thinking how funny it was in hindsight, because people are like, you really have to have that dedication to like work in this field. And I'm like, I don't really care that much about it. I cared more about that woman's feelings being hurt in the moment. But it was super fulfilling to push yourself hard enough just to see that smile on that woman's face. She was so happy.
I bet she was. That's a cool story.
Yeah. And it was awesome just because this random experience that I happened to have
Yeah. Wow.
like a decade earlier overlapped with what was needed in that moment. So it was just kind of cool.
That's very cool. Yeah. You never know.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kim, thank you so much. This was cool. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was great having you on.